Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we study up on various theories of everything, all-encompassing theories that could benefit your life if you knew about them, help you figure out uh, what life is on Earth in the universe is about, and what are the rules, and usually these are things that you would never hear of otherwise if it weren't for this channel. I don't know that anybody's really talking about the reciprocal system of theory out there, not that I've seen. And today is video number 233 on the reciprocal system of theory. This is a theory of everything that was originated by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. He started his research into this about 1930, his first epiphanies, worked it out on an inductive basis from the 30s until the late 1950s, wrote up his fundamental postulates, two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s, and then started writing books based on a process of deduction. So once he had the postulates, he took those postulates and said, well, if this, then that. And then if that, then this. If that, then this. And he constructed a theoretical universe. And then, kind of compared his theoretical universe with the universe that was really already, being uncovered by the legacy scientists. And I think that was kind of even the weak spot of his approach, was that he, assumed that the scientists were doing kind of independent and unbiased research, when a lot of times they were just kind of covering their butts and favoring their own pet theories, and it wasn't nearly as of a objective of a search as what Larson thought it was, and that caused him to make some mistakes as well. So the basic idea in Larson's system is that we live in a universe of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. That was kind of the key definition of motion that distinguished Larson's theories from other people who had theories of motion, universe of motion in the past. And his identification of motion with the relationship between space and time also sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. Motion is basically a fraction, where time or space is the numerator and space or time is the denominator. All kinds of motion are time over space or space over time, but they also come in multi-dimensions. So it could be time over space to the second power, or space over time to the second power. Space over time to the second power we know to be acceleration. You drop the ball out the window and the ball falls at 9.8 meters per second squared. Meters per second squared. Meters of space per second of time squared. S over t squared. Now that I guess conjugate time over space to the second power is force. Space over time we know to be speed. The car is moving 20 miles per hour. 20 miles of space, 1 hour of time. Time over space is energy. Matter is time to the third power over space to the third power. And by kind of doing that, he creates a very simple system of units, along with a very good check, a way to check your work, to see if your equations work out. and he applied that to many equations from legacy science. He did make a couple mistakes with his attributions that eventually were corrected to some extent by Dr. Bruce Perret, who we'll be hearing from here soon. Now, like I said, time and space have a reciprocal relationship. They're the same thing, except they are numerator and denominator, and they have the same qualities. And one of them is this coordinate aspect, 3 or more dimensions of space. There are also 3 or more dimensions of time. Then there is the scalar aspect, the clock. The clock is always getting later and later and later. That is a scalar motion. It's a motion that has a magnitude but has no direction. And we recognize that in the clock of time. But that is also true in space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, which you would envision using either raisin bread that you are putting in the oven and all the raisins are moving away from each other, or a balloon with a magic marker and you blow up the balloon, all the dots that you put on the balloon with the magic marker are moving away from each other. And then space and time both also have only their discrete units. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time, and less than that does not exist. That sets up 2 separate boundaries. And then the third boundary is what Larson calls unit speed, the speed of light. 1 unit of 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. So that is what Larson calls unit speed. That is a boundary between 2 different regions that Larson calls the material sector and the cosmic sector. The material sector we're familiar with, where everything is moving at slower than the speed of light. The cosmic sector we're not so familiar with. That is where everything is moving faster than the speed of light. And that whole sector defies Albert Einstein's dicta that nothing moves faster than the speed of light. And that's probably why we don't know much about it, or at least partially why. Now, the other 2 boundaries are the unit time boundary and the unit space boundary. Less than 1 unit of space, we don't, because of the discrete unit postulate, we do not have any space. Therefore, everything is time. Everything is either time or space, or motion. And then within a unit of time, we don't have time, we only have space. So Larson calls those the time region and the space region. And they are subregions within the material sector and the cosmic sector, respectively. Okay, now he took those basic postulates, and like I said, he created an entire theoretical universe from the start. He deduced a theoretical universe from those postulates and eventually wrote books on all kinds of subjects such as physics and astrophysics and chemistry and astronomy and metaphysics and economics and other subjects as well. And Perret takes over about the time that Larson passed away in 1990, and he started to work on other subjects, in particular geochronology, planetary dynamics, and anthropology. So we're reading his first paper in his anthropology series. It's a 4-part anthropology series, and the first paper is called Geochronology. And this paper was written under his pen name Daniel Phoenix III, and it came out probably around 2013 or so, I think, and he passed away back in 2020. Not before he did some very great work, along with some fairly speculative work as well. This paper is a little bit on the speculative side. especially where he starts fudging the numbers with all kinds of dates. But he introduces some very interesting concepts in this paper. And here he's really, in this section, Noah, I want you to build an ark. An ark, right? What's an ark? That is he's about to explain. An arc is really a moon, but it's a moon that it well, not it's a an asteroid that functions as a moon. He's really kind of saying that our moon and some other moons that are in the solar system are actually spaceships, very large spaceships that are what you call prefab spaceships, made out of an inverse density gradient, so that the heaviest elements are on the surface and the lightest elements are in the center, so that it is a hollowed out hard shell. And he uses the principles of the reciprocal system to make these leaps here. So we're going to start right here, just into this section. Also noteworthy in these arc designs is that if ultra-high anti-gravity motion is still present, as it is in planetary cores, the center of the atmospheric cavity will contain a small sun-like object representing that inner core construct, a structure that exactly matches the hollow Earth theories. When the intermediate speed motion of the arc finally slows to sublight speeds, the arc dies, so-called, dies, and is no longer functional as a spacecraft. This is what the Vero annotations are referring to concerning the Martian moons as dead arcs. Montauk, which again, Perret claims that Daniel Phoenix 3 was one of the programmers at the Montauk project. Montauk had references of there being a large number of dead arcs scattered throughout the solar system, as they don't last forever and are abandoned. If the moon were an arc, then there should be some references to times when it was not in orbit or missing altogether in mythology. In his paper, The Earth Without the Moon, Velikovsky cites many sources of a time when there was no moon in the sky. The period when the Earth was moonless is probably the most remote recollection of mankind. Democritus and Anaxagoras taught that there was a time when the Earth was without the moon. This is quoting Velikovsky. So, Aristotle wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians, and that these aborigines occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. For this reason, they were called Proselines. Apollonius of Rhodes mentioned the time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Danai and Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said that they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. Pharaoh wrote in the Roman Questions, quote, there were Arcadians of Evander's following, the so-called pre-lunar people. Similarly, wrote Ovid, the Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. Okay, now I'm just kind of looking through some of the footnotes here to make sure there's nothing that is crucial. Okay, back to the same quote from Velikovsky. Hippolytus refers to a legend that Arcadia brought forth Pelasgus, of greater antiquity than the moon. Lucian, in his astrology, says that the Arcadians affirm in their folly that they are older than the moon. Censorinus also alludes to the time in the past when there was no moon in the sky. Some allusions to the time before there was a moon may be found also in the scriptures. In Job 25, verse 5, the grandeur of the Lord who makes peace in the heights is praised, and the time is mentioned, quote, before a moon, and it did not shine. Also in Psalm 72, verse 5, it is said, thou wast feared since the sun and before the moon, a generation of generations. A generation of generations means a very long time, of course. It is of no use to counter this psalm with the myth of the first chapter of Genesis, a tale brought down from exotic and later sources. The memory of a world without a moon lives in oral tradition among the Indians. The Indians of Bogota Highlands in the eastern Cordilleras of Colombia relate some of their tribal reminiscences to the time before there was a moon. In the earliest times, when the moon was not yet in the heavens, say the tribesmen of Chibeas. I think that is the end of the quote there from Velikovsky. Religious Apocrypha also relates that during the time of Adam in the Garden of Eden, the sun remained fixed in the eastern sky, and the cycle of days and nights only began upon their expulsion from the garden, which we now know correlates to the time of the first destruction of Atlantis. Something big changed. They did measure a daily cycle, the movement of the celestial chariot across the sky, as is common in many ancient myths. 7 times the Lord crossed the heavens. 7 domas, or hebdomas, what we now call a week, was originally a measurement of a day, when the earth had none. But the descriptions refer to a lord, meaning shining star, not something the size of the moon. The garden had no nights, but did have an orbital object bright enough to be visible in the light of day. The observations that the earth did not have a moon and did not rotate on its axis, meaning tidal lock with the sun, are supported by the natural consequences of the reciprocal system astronomy. Again, we find science, religion, and myth all saying the same thing. I did some checking of Velikovsky's references and found that the moon actually appeared and disappeared at fairly regular intervals during pre-Adamic times, the divine year. Velikovsky attributes this to a wandering moon intersecting the orbit of Earth until it was finally captured. It sounds good, but for one reciprocal exception. Moons and planets having motion in time will behave in the same manner as atoms having their motion in time. When atoms go into stable orbit, we call it chemistry. That chemistry is based on the concepts of valence, which is just matching speeds in the reciprocal system. The probability against a planet and moon to having exactly the right chemistry to achieve stable orbit is, shall I say, astronomical. The largest factor is overcoming the unit speed boundary, the same limit that keeps all the atoms in the universe from coming together to form a single supermolecule of everything. The only way a moon could establish orbit around a planet, given the chemical requirements of the reciprocal system, would be to adjust its motions as it approached to match the new environment. Not likely for a random fragment of a white dwarf, but very likely for an arc under intelligent control. The natural consequences of our theory indicate that the moons of the inner planets are not natural in the sense of evolving with the associated planets, but are actually arcs that were used by the SM Anunnaki, Saurian men and Anunnaki, placed in orbit around Earth and Mars not very long ago. The Martian arcs of Phobos and Deimos are dead and are now just asteroids in decaying orbit. However, the Earth's arc, the Moon, is still running on impulse power with its inverse density gradient, hard shell, and gaseous core. Consider NASA's lunar mysteries in this light. And we will get into NASA's lunar mysteries when we resume tomorrow. That will be the end for today, and I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you have a great day. Come back tomorrow.